All right, so all cars have one of three different ignition systems. So I'm going to go over each system individually. For right now, let's just get the names of them down as they appear right now. So this is an example of a distributor system. So a distributor system distributes the spark to each spark plug. This is like 1980s and older. Kind of went away after 1990, but there are some cars all the way up to 2000 that have a distributor. Then in 1990, we introduced the DIS system. There's no more distributor. It is a distributor pack, or sorry, it is a coil pack. So the coil packs now send a spark to each system, or each spark plug. So we have distributor, we have DIS, which is distributorless ignition system, and then we have last one that we have starts about 2000, and this is what we call a coil and plug system. Okay, so a coil and plug system, we don't have a distributor, we don't have coil packs. We put a coil right on each spark plug, and we eliminated all those wires. So coil and plug started about 2000. The DIS started about 1990, and then distributors, they started all the way back like in the, I don't want to say 40s or maybe even older than that. So three systems: distributor, DIS, or coil and plug. Okay, so distributor cars have a distributor, but they're easy to identify. So one of our things we need to understand is how do you identify which system is on the car. So a distributor, obviously we have a distributor on the car, but you have plug wires, and the middle plug wire, the one that goes in the middle right here, goes all the way over to a single coil. So all distributor cars run on a single coil. Okay, and so the single coil is what generates that electricity that goes to each of your spark plugs. So this is what generates the energy. So that plugs into the center tower of your distributor right here. Okay, and then from there, I have one plug that's not hooked up, so that would have been a shock. So from there, the distributor distributes the spark to the right cylinder at the right time. Okay, so coil generates the spark, goes to our distributor, and the distributor distributes the spark to each spark plug. As far as sensors go, the sensor that tells the distributor tells the computer when to fire the spark plug and which one to apply it to is inside the cap. So I'm going to take this cap off right now. And so all distributors, part of the tune-up is to replace your plugs, replace your wires, to replace your distributor cap as well. Let's get this off. And then so inside here, right inside, is what we call a Hall effect sensor that tells the computer, based on these vanes right here, which cylinder to send the spark plug to. So each one of these vanes represents one spark plug. So we have 4 vanes on this. So I'm going to disconnect my coil right now because I don't want to get shocked. Remember, a coil generates your energy. So let's go ahead and take this coil off. Unplug it. So now you could see I have 1 vane, 2 vanes, 3 vanes, 4 vanes. So this is what we call a Hall effect sensor. There is also a variable reluctance one, but we won't get into that. Here is your distributor cap. So we replaced the distributor cap on all tune-ups. There's 1 tower for each spark plug, and then the way we distribute the spark is what we call a rotor. So part of your tune-up on a distributor car will always be to replace these rotors that spin inside your distributor cap. Okay, so when you do a tune-up on a distributor car, it's more than just spark plugs, it's more than just wires. It is also a cap and rotor as part of your tune-up, and people forget that. It's incomplete just to change the plugs or just to change the wires. You should change the cap and the rotor the wires and the plugs. And what happens is the energy from the coil goes into the center electrode here. It hits this little metal tang on your rotor and then sends it out to the tip right here, the rotor, and then this spins inside here, sending your spark to the right spark plug. Okay, so this is a rotor, this is a cap, and these are your high voltage wires and then your plugs. So let me put this back together. The distributor cap distributes the spark to the right cylinders according to how the wires are routed. But here's the thing. Most distributor caps will have a number on them, okay? That number will always be the number 1. So this is telling you this spark plug tower goes to cylinder number 1. And then most 4 cylinders will be 1, 3, 4, 2. 1, 3, 4, 2. Okay, so then from here, you route your wires. But the problem is, you don't know if this is spinning clockwise or counterclockwise inside the car, inside. So what you do is you take your distributor, pull the distributor cap off, and you need to verify by cranking the engine, is the rotor spinning counterclockwise or is the rotor spinning clockwise? Because depending on how this rotor spins, when you crank the motor, dictate from the number 1 cylinder, do you route the wires counterclockwise or do you route the wires clockwise, and depending on what number they go to. We're going to go out and model that in a little bit. I have my distributor cap on with my rotor on. Now I can plug my coil in. Remember, the coil is what generates the spark, and then I can turn this and you can see the spark plugs firing at a different one each time, depending on how I turn this. So that is a distributor system. Now we're on to a DIS system, which is a distributorless system. It has no distributor. What we have is we have coil packs now, we have a computer, okay, and we have a sensor that is not part of the distributor, but down on the engine. So this is our crank position sensor. So it knows where the engine is in relationship to each cylinder. So it still needs to fire the spark plugs at the right time. So all coil packs have numbers. So this one fires 2 and 5. This one fires 6 and 3. And this one fires, it looks like, 1 and 4. Okay? So each coil pack fires 2 spark plugs at the same time. So when this fires, it fires these 2. One is the actual spark and one's a waste spark, which it comes back to the coil. So each coil pack fires 2 spark plugs at the same time, sends them down to the spark plugs. And so I'll go ahead and get this spinning. And you can see the sparks going ahead and igniting down here, okay? But how does the computer know which spark plug should get which timing-wise when to fire it based on the piston? Is it has to have a crank sensor. Now the distributor that I went over had a Hall effect sensor. And I mentioned that they're either going to be a Hall effect or a variable reluctance sensor. This is a variable reluctance sensor. It has a magnet right at the tip right here. So right where I have my finger, you see a little magnet, and I can show you it's a magnet because I can put this in here and it's magnetized. It has a little stick. See, it just kind of holds it up. There you go. And then there's wiring inside, and so what it does, it fluctuates the magnetic field over the wires inside, and that creates a signal based on these little notches on the wheel. So what it's doing is actually, and you can feel the magnetic field just by doing this, it's waving that magnetic field across over the windings, which sends a signal to the computer. So this is our crank sensor, and this crank sensor the signal is sent to the computer. Then the computer turns on the coil. The coil still generates the energy, and that sends it through the high voltage wires to each spark plug. Okay, so we still have spark plug wires, but we no longer have a distributor on a distributorless ignition system. And now we're on to the last system, was a coil on plug. You notice there's no more spark plug wire. So how do we identify that a car is a coil on plug, or also called a COP system? Is we look on top of the motor and you'll see the coil packs. They look very similar to this no matter what the car is. You notice there's no spark plug wires, okay? So the spark plug wires are eliminated by putting a coil right onto the spark plug. So if I were to turn this key on, we start spinning our engine, or cranking our engine, and that generates the energy to fire the spark plugs. So now, how does it really work? Okay, so the coils generate your voltage to jump the gap on the spark plug. Okay, that's pretty obvious. So these are what generating the energy. But we got to know when to fire each spark plug. So we do that with 2 or 3 different sensors now. So this is your crank sensor up here. Okay, so this would be in the bottom pulley of your engine, so on your crankshaft. And then we have a camshaft pulley, which would be on the top of the motor, where your camshafts are at. And then most of these systems will always have a NOx sensor. So here's your crankshaft sensor, CKP. Here's your camshaft sensor, which would be a CMP. And then you have your NOx sensor, which just is not an acronym, it's just a NOx sensor, okay? And these 3 systems control your ignition system. In this case, your coil on plug system. So it's what generates the signal to your computer, and here you could actually see the computer. So the computer knows when to fire the spark plug, depending on which cylinder is approaching top dead center compression. Okay, so those are the 3 systems: COP, DIS, and distributor systems.